Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom. Informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI. Food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It's Tuesday, the 15th of October, 2024, and this is program number 1263 of the Lunchroom. I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Now, in addition to radio on 101.1 FM, you can also get us at our website. It's rcistlucia.com. We're streaming live there, and you can also download our previous shows in podcast form if you so choose. As well, we are streaming live on Facebook. You just have to search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International and be sure to like and share that as well with your friends and family. The number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. You can also reach us on WhatsApp, and that is 724-0008. You can, of course, message in or call in on WhatsApp. And again, that number is 724-0008. In just a bit, we are going to be talking about standards with representatives of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. Yesterday was International Standards Day, and one of their initiatives is, in fact, the launching of an important instrument for learning. It's an activity book geared towards helping out students in school, learning about standards and the importance there. But we get to that in just a bit. First, some birthday greetings going out to Mr. Jonathan Gladding. It's his birthday today, in fact. And also to Miss Tercel Louis. Happy birthday to you. Hope you have a great one. And Ulani Thibbles. Happy birthday to you, Ulani. We do hope that you're having a fantastic birthday celebration. And also to Mrs. Cassie Henville John. Happy birthday. Hope you're having a fantastic one. A little bit of history for today. Back in the year 1581, commissioned by Catherine de' Medici, the first known ballet was staged in Paris, in France. It was called the Ballet Comique de la Reine. In the year 1582, the Gregorian calendar was introduced in Spain, Portugal, and the Papal States after skipping 10 days from October the 4th to sync the calendar to the solar year and compensate for the drift that had occurred due to the Julian calendar having too many leap days. 1815, on this day, saw Napoleon Bonaparte arriving on the island of St. Helena to begin his exile and, of course, eventual death on that island. 1969, Vietnam Moratorium Day in the United States, saw millions nationwide protesting against the war. And in 1993, on this day, October the 15th, Nelson Mandela and South African president at the time, F.W. de Klerk, were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. We now move on to our dish of the day. The daily dish is brought to you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Bruce Lakes, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our program here at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Now, of course, earlier on in the dish of the, history of the day, we heard about the matter of time and the Gregorian calendar and that shift there in dates, and the importance of trying to get the dates right, and shifting is in time. And of course, in all matters, even in time, there are standards, and there are, in fact, institutions around the world who deal with these matters of measurement, matters of quality control, matters of ensuring that you're getting effectively what is being stated on whatever product, package, service you are in fact receiving. It goes way beyond that, of course, in terms of industry and how things are run. And it's really a very important concept in today's modern worlds. And of course, right here in St. Lucia, we have such an institution, the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, and they are responsible for a number of standards related matters, metrology. I know they're involved in ensuring you're getting good value for money from the products out there and the services that you are receiving. And of course, tell us a little bit about what they do, given that it was just yesterday, World Standards Day, and some of the initiatives that they're pushing out right now in terms of public education. So very pleased to have the head, HOD, head of Department for Standards Development, Mr. Andre Charles, as well as Mr. Don Pierre, who is a standards officer responsible for compliance within the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming in on air and sharing with us the work of the SLBS.
All right. Alex, thanks a lot. Thanks also for RCI for having us this afternoon. And again, thanks for the invitation. And we want to really use this moment to push, first of all, World Standards Day. World Standards Day, the theme actually is pushing infrastructure, innovation, and industry through AI. So I think that's very important to know. The way the global landscape, the way the world is moving into a lot of digitization, a lot of artificial intelligence. So that's where the theme and what's at the heart of World Standards Day 2024. Our purpose here today is we'll speak a bit about the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, as Calix noted, what we do, and we could also bring in the book. We have a book. This development is really to get kids, students, all ages into what are standards, what do we do at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, and the quality infrastructure, national quality infrastructure. So in saying that, what do we do at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards? Well, really, we're an organization task. We have that responsibility of developing and managing the national quality infrastructure, where we looked at not just developing standards, and that those standards are guidance documents, guidelines as to how do you achieve something? What are the processes? What do you go through for repeatable quality? And from that standards development process, we then have the conformity assessment. And the conformity assessment in itself really is a fancy word for how do you ensure that the standards that we follow are being effectively implemented. And my colleague next to me, Don Pierre, he works in one of those departments in conformity assessment, in the compliance department. So it's really these different departments that are almost a process flow, starting with standards development, moving into the conformity assessment, which includes certification and compliance, and finally metrology. And metrology being that department in charge of the weights and measures that will ensure you are getting exactly what you're paying for when it comes to a measurement. So very important that role. And again, we are a national standards body, but with that saying that we're a national standards body, we also form parts of regional standards bodies and international standards body. So within CARICOM, we have what we call CROSSQ, the Caribbean Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, which is mandated with our task with developing CARICOM standards. We have internationally the International Organization of Standardization, ISO, very correct, ISO. And we also have Codex Alimentarius, which is a part of the FAO, and that deals with food safety standards guiding international trade. So again, we have a national purpose, a regional purpose, and an international purpose. And again, all these departments play their role in the hand-holding to increase quality infrastructure, national quality infrastructure in St. Lucia.
Yeah, and this is a behemoth of a topic, really, an area. You mentioned the ISO, and they're, I think, around for almost 100 years. I think in 1926 they came about. And so you've seen over that period of time a significant amount of development of standards and revision of standards, and ensuring that people, experts from around the world, come together to define new things, and with so many new topics that are coming up. I mean, you just mentioned, for instance, artificial intelligence, and perhaps some people may have had a very loose understanding of artificial intelligence, maybe from a television sci-fi, maybe watching Star Trek and thinking about data, and but it's now come to a more tangible reality for a lot of people over the past year, that it's become such a topical matter that sometimes the technology is racing ahead of any implementation of standards to be able to actually, guard the society and the health and safety matters. It's a very, very difficult field when you think about it.
Apt words used there, the society. So it's exactly that. The industry is pressing ahead, developing AI, artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence is really taking us into places we couldn't imagine. How do we corral that back to meet the consumer? Because at the end of the day, the end user consumer is where everything is at. That is why standards exist. That is why the conformity assessment exists for these standards, to benefit the consumer. So really, how do we create these standards that benefit the society at large? And again, it being World Standards Day 2024 yesterday, that direct look at artificial intelligence, developing ICT standards. In fact, that is actually a new technical committee we're looking at. And the technical committee is a group of experts, locally, a group of national experts that are utilized to develop standards. And they come from all different stakeholders: academia, private sector, government, etc.
And that's a really interesting point that you're raising too, because in as much as you have these international agencies, you also have a lot of disparities too, in terms of regions. The Americans have their own standard, the Europeans have theirs, Latin America may have another, and the big question is, well, really, what works best for our own reality here in a small island developing state may not always be applicable.
Right. So off of that, and again, another excellent point. Off of that is why we are actually a part of these regional and international organizations. So we don't just are the standards takers, we're also the standards makers. So we have a seat at the table for any of the ISO, that those international standards or the regional standards in CARICOM and cross-Q. And our technical experts, our technical committee experts can actually participate in the standards development process. So from right at that moment, we can begin affecting these regional and international standards. So really important, and you made another point when it comes to the national process. When we take an international standard or a regional standard, we can apply that nationally to make it fit for purpose in our local circumstances. And that's really important, again, to push trade, to push commerce, and all these things that go along with it.
And I'm glad that you raised that issue about trade and commerce. I mean, I know you're a bio man, and the issue of food being one of these very important but also controversial areas where standards matter a whole deal. And we think about, the challenges that quite often we as small island states are faced with in terms of accessing new markets, and the standards barriers that are placed or used, perhaps one can say, to make it a little bit more difficult for us to actually access some of these markets. Very long processes sometimes to meet the compliance. I think of the organics, what is organic, what is not, and how do you prove that your farm is suitable? There's a lot of work that I'm not sure. I mean, is the Bureau of Standards sufficiently placed to be able to take that on?
Okay, so just let me say one thing first of all. The standards are not really there to be technical barriers to trade. The standards are there to facilitate trade. Now, again, based on some of the disparities in technology, that's how standards may seem, especially international standards. It might seem that this is a monumentous task for the small business person, and to achieve that, to get that market access, to achieve your product being exported to that market, that you need to meet these standards and the conformity assessment, the certification that might go along with it. So in saying that, the standards really allows a guidance of what is required, because each country in their sovereignty, they have a national purpose of protecting their people via security. You made a point of food security, and food security being one of those exact examples. So how do you get food in your country that you know is safe and wholesome to your population? Because we don't want to, no country wants to have food that is not safe, that is not wholesome. So the standards really allow countries who are exporting to other countries a guidance of what is required. What do you do to get to access my market access requirements, right? And very, very significant, you noted food safety and the whole idea of food security. That's where Codex Alimentarius comes in. And again, the point I raised of us not just being standards takers, but being a part of the international landscape and being standards makers on the international landscape allows us to have our voice. So when we listen to the local society, the national economy, and those are the technical experts that feed into that process, we have that voice at that point in time.
But would it get to a point where you think that institutions like Bureau of Standards, other local institutions in the food sector, for example, would have the strength, the fortitude to say, hey, we're not going to be importing this, or we're going to be, in fact, banning certain products from coming into our space on the basis that we know this is, there's evidence to show that it's carcinogenic, or there's evidence to show that this is actually leading to major issues, whether it's diabetes, hypertension. Right. I mean, could we actually get to that point, do you think?
So definitely, I mean, that will have to be led by legislation also. So when you look at the Committee for Food Import Export, CCFIX for short, in Codex, that's where standards are developed, international standards are developed for the importation or exportation of food, again, that is safe. Locally, we do within the Ministry of Health, that is their role in direct food security, food safety, where they will be, or they can directly look at what are the aspects of food that are safe and unsafe, right? Within the purvey of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, we have standards that will guide food safety. So when you look at things like, we have what we call the GMP, the prerequisite programs, which are good manufacturing processes. And we say, okay, this is a market access requirement by any of the larger retail, or any retailer might want to implement that standard for their incoming goods. And they say, okay, they want this level of food security, this level of food safety. And if they don't have that, if they cannot see some sort of conformity to that they don't buy the food. There is that also available at the commercial level within stores, retailers, etc.
But do you think that there's a sufficient level of appreciation by state actors, whether through the technical agencies, you mentioned Ministry of Health, for instance, the politicians, perhaps, that really the standards platform is a very, very powerful space within which they can actually direct society in terms of protecting the public interest in terms of food, and just using food because it's such a controversial one,
and it's a major area. Again, food security is a national security interest. So to answer that question directly, yes. I mean, there is always more work that can be done. Also, standards, although they are voluntary consensus standards can also be utilized within technical regulations. Right now, we have what we call compulsory standards, and Don here works in the compliance department. I don't know if you want to bring up some compulsory standards that are more directed to food, probably the labeling, and speak about that.
Currently, the labeling standard is a compulsory standard, and through generally complaints on our market surveillance program, we monitor labels island-wide and on every import which comes in. So we have the minimum requirements broken down within the standards for the labels, which would, for food, for example, you would need things like best before. It has to be in English, storage information, and there's a whole list in the breakdown of the standard. These will be the minimum requirements for it to actually be on the shelf, so consumers could have access to it. Without cutting you short,
go ahead.
Without cutting you short, apart from the the compulsory standard for labeling, we have other compulsory standards. For example, we have the tire inspection program, and then we have, which is another food. We have a bottle of water compulsory standard. So for imports, bottled water has to be accompanied with a certificate, which breaks down the analysis. So there are minimum requirements for HPC, traffic plate count, and total coliforms and pseudomonas. So that would ensure safety for consumption throughout the national construct.
And there's so much to talk about as we're getting into that one, but we're going to have to put a pause on it because we're actually due for our weather report. So I think we're going to take that in right now, compliments of the St. Lucia Met Services. And when we come back, we continue to have this conversation. Of course, yesterday was World Standards Day, and we are speaking on the entire matter of standards' importance in our lives today with Mr. Andre Charles and Mr. Don Pierre of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. We'll be right back.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Boss, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses, Bruce Lanes, and Slack Street in Viewfort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style.
We have tiles and king sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the house out. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Belarus and Rodney Bay on the John Compton Highway, Castries, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And that's for the post on 1.1. It's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Tile and Bath. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. The winds will be blowing from between the east, northeast, and east near 18 miles per hour or 30 kilometers per hour. The weather fair skies becoming cloudy at times with a few scattered showers. The forecast for the Lesser Antilles, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy at times with widely scattered showers over the Windward Islands and areas further south. Over the Leeward Islands, fair to partly cloudy with a few showers. And the tropical weather outlook, weak unstable conditions will cause some scattered showers mainly over the southern half of the Lesser Antilles during the forecast period. A tropical wave associated with an area of low pressure located over the central tropical Atlantic is moving westward near 15 miles per hour or 24 kilometers per hour. This system has a medium chance of tropical cyclone development during the next 7 days. And this was the weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Tile and Bath.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island Style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island Style. We got the time that will make you happy. Island Style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island Style.
We have tiles Insects, mixes and ground. Everything you need is on the outside. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style Car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Belarus and Rodney Bay on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to the Lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. We're discussing standards. Yesterday was International Standards Day, and we've got representatives of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards here to share with us some of the initiatives, and of course the whole idea of how the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards works, very importantly enough. And that's the whole idea, really, I suppose, behind this activity book, which you have in fact developed. Tell us a little bit about the book, the genesis of that.
Okay, thanks again, Calix. So this book started roughly around 1.5 to 2 years ago, the idea for having this book. And it was felt that the knowledge of standards and why standards and the national quality infrastructure, how are we going to present this not just at the commercial higher business level, but how are we going to break this down to kids so they could understand the importance of standards? Because globally standards are utilized to cross borders for goods and services crossing borders. And this is how countries trade. So how do you have children understanding this from a much earlier age without the really highfalutin stuff that you would tend to go through in some of these documents shared by ISO or our national standardizing body? But it was felt that it's very important that children understand that kids understand that from a much earlier age, so they know what to look for, even for themselves when they're looking at products, services, etc. And so that is where the head of our communications department, he really saw it was necessary to develop an activity book. And we felt that activity book has gone through quite a bit of consultation. As it was going through all its stages of development, teachers were co-opted to review the activity book. Persons from the Ministry of Education were co-opted to review this activity book. Staff and just other persons of kids were co-opted to review this activity book. So we have an idea of exactly what is applicable, what is fair for a child to read. So we hope that this book, which will be distributed around schools, and there are electronic copies available also on our website, for persons, to kids, parents even could go through this book. Teachers will have an idea of what is the national quality infrastructure, why do we need standards, why we develop standards, and why we have conformity assessment of standards. Again, bringing into that entire play the national quality infrastructure and how all organizations could utilize that national quality infrastructure to improve their outcomes.
Indeed, and of course, it's a title in creating a culture of quality.
Correct, yes.
And quite an extensive book giving some indication as to what is, the SLBS and your legal basis and how it's structured,
correct,
yeah. And very, very, of course, interesting production. Some of the work that you're using, of course, as Dawn mentioned earlier on, the issue of labeling,
right?
That seems to still be a bit of an issue, especially even in things like pharmaceuticals. The issue
I'll leave Dawn to answer that one. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, how do you ensure that all these products which are coming in are actually onto the shelves compliant?
Well, you mentioned pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceuticals fall under. You mentioned pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceuticals fall under different scope in that you have prescription drugs. So prescription drugs would fall more under the Association of Medical and Dental, but you find daily pharmaceuticals on the shelves. These would fall under the labeling standard. So we would have the English language requirements and specific requirements for them.
And matters of things like expiration on shelves, how is that really? I mean, you see that sometimes you're going into a shelf and you actually do have. I experienced that recently at a store. looking for a particular type of off-the-shelf medication, and in fact, it hadn't inspired at the time.
Right.
I mean, that too must be a big challenge in terms of monitoring and compliance.
Yes, it is actually with the issue of the expiry for the labeling standard. Now you would find different government agencies have similar but different scopes.
Right.
So having
Consumer Affairs is the one that handles that one,
mandating it to be within the expiry, but we have to ensure that the expiry is there on the label.
Interesting. And so, of course, there is the Standards Council. Is that the correct term? And tell us about how that is structured and why that council is really important in terms of bringing a lot of these various players and actors together.
So, okay. The Standards Council really it's a body which acts to direct policy for the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. And as that body directing policy, they would look at what are some of the areas of national economic priority. And when we're looking at our strategic plan, what is the area of focus? How are we going to press on in terms of what is important for St. Lucia? So that's where the Standards Council really has a major role. Within that role also, they would be the ones writing, basically rubber stamping the standards after they've gone through the entire process. So they'll be the ones that are saying, yes, these standards that we've presented, the staff has presented to you, the Standards Council. It has gone through the entire process. These are the standards that we have to become national standards. So basically they sign off saying, yes, these are the standards they're willing, they listen. These are the standards that they can sign off on, and they become national standards once they become gazetted. Yeah. But so let me just add to that in terms of the Standards Council. Again, as policymakers, they're looking at what is the general direction, what are we going to attack? How do we see where the national quality infrastructure of St. Lucia is going?
And I'm glad that you're raising that the whole matter of infrastructure in this context, because I mean, right now, I think we know that your head over at the bureau is an engineer, civil engineer, man, and the matter of infrastructure, the quality of the infrastructure. I mean, obviously, you're not responsible for that. There are agencies out there, the Ministry of Infrastructure, and what the overall guidance on what standards are being utilized, let's say even in things like road construction, is that really set at the moment, or is it really just up to whoever is in charge? I mean, and I'm saying so because the Americans have their standards, let's say in AASHTO, the British have their BS, and so I mean, so how do you end up with a final standard for St. Lucia?
Okay, so as you said, the responsibility would normally lie with infrastructure, Ministry of Infrastructure. The Development Control Authority will review applications coming in for development. However, within the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, where we develop infrastructural standards, voluntary consensus standards for infrastructure, we have what the CREEBC, which is an energy efficient building code, right? And those standards can be utilized by contractors, by anybody who's engaging in construction, to again have a baseline level of quality and a baseline level of energy efficiency. So to persons out there, it will be important, in fact, actually it will be beneficial to you to ask your contractor, what standard are you using? Are you utilizing standards that are nationally available, such as that building energy efficient building code? And those standards, again, will make you go so much further in terms of the development of your property.
But these are voluntary.
These are voluntary standards, voluntary standards. So again, as Don noted, some of the relevant authorities, again, Ministry of Infrastructure, they'll deal, or DCA, they will deal directly with applications and what is required, what are the building requirements. But these are add-ons, again, to put yourself that much higher, to get that much better quality of product. Yeah. And some of those standards, again, wherever it's seen necessary, can become parts of technical regulations, and that's where it gets the teeth.
How does the Bureau of Standards determine its current remit? in what areas? I mean, and you did mention,
Mhm.
of course, there's a standards council,
Right.
but of course, a lot of these matters end up being legal. Do you have the laws? Do you have the legal space to be able to say, hey, we are going to actually get involved in setting standards, say, for argument's sake, for roads?
Yeah, actually, so the Standards Act of 1990 is what allows us, this is our legal mandate. This is what allows us to develop national standards. And within that development of the national standards, that is really empowers us to create standards within technical committees. There's a set process, a set methodology. And by going through that, we create these voluntary consensus documents, which are, again, the baseline of what the national quality, what you expect. So that is the Standards Act is really what empowers us. And there's also the Meteorology Act of 2000 that will empower us to also look at the weights and measures. So these are the two standards that guide us essentially. And again, where it's seen fit, some of these standards can become parts of technical regulations. There's another point you just noted there, where you were looking at what will guide what we do in terms of why develop ICT standards, why develop food standards. And again, we go through the process where we look at a strategy. What are the important economic industries or important economic sectors in St. Lucia? And that will really guide the standardizing process. That doesn't mean standards that are not within these major areas cannot be developed, but that will be where we put a lot of attention, because that's where persons will be demanding standards and a certain level of quality.
Do you have a lot of agencies knocking at your doors in terms of looking for support and guidance on some of these things? I mean, just for example, I like to use these anecdotes. The Export St. Lucia, I think I heard them mentioning very recently, they want to introduce standards or certification for CMOS.
Right, correct.
And the whole idea of is there something unique in terms of St. Lucia CMOS and branding? Right. That nexus between the branding, but of course the underpinning standards that have to be met in that regard. Is that an area you find that a lot of agencies are looking to the Bureau to get guidance and support for standards development?
So definitely. We have sister agencies, and you mentioned one in Export St. Lucia. There's also the Youth Economy Agency, also even some of the ministries, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport. All of these areas, these agencies, they tend to ask us to assist. And it's really, again, along that path of what are the standards? Are there any relevant standards that they could utilize? If there are no standards, can we develop standards along those lines? So with an example, you noted CMOS, and Export St. Lucia did put something out, and we are again a sister agency where we would work with them to develop those standards and look at what is the conformity assessment to meet those things. That notwithstanding that, there is also quite a bit of drive in terms of projects. So there is an STDF Standards and Trade Development Facility under the WTO, and we got that project proposal grant, which is really a fund to develop a consultancy to look at the supply chain of CMOS in St. Lucia. Again, CMOS is becoming such a huge space for economic development and growth in that niche sector. The United States, there's quite a bit of exports, and even with that project, the USDA noted that they want to really look into that project because they want to be a part of it, basically, because again, they're the market that these products are coming to, and they would like to have an idea. I mean, clearly they want their food security and safety in check, of how it's being done, what is being done, and it's up to, again, these international standards. And again, so this is where we're looking at going with what we do, and in case in point in CMOS.
You're the National Standards Institute. Do other agencies out there see themselves as having that responsibility in terms of setting standards in their particular areas? And
you're referring to local agencies?
Local agencies, yeah.
Because, again, we're the national body, they tend to come to us. Now, it doesn't take away, there are certain areas, vocational standards, TVET, they would do, develop standards within industry standards, they're called. But in terms of national standards, we have that mandate. And again, why we remake the wheel?
And I know, but I'm thinking, for example, like in the case of food again, and I know there's been a fair bit of investment in terms of a new national diagnostic facility to give us the capacity now to do the testing, the lab work, to deal with a lot of these verifications, validations that are required. Does that agency see itself as being part of that?
That's a sister
is it that ecosystem of standards?
So it's so interesting. The St. Lucia Bureau of Standards is very much involved in that National Agricultural Diagnostic Facility, and many cases we get the call from them because there is an MOU that is signed. So whenever they need a standard, we supply them with that standard. So just recently there was a standard for, I think, was it poultry, and yes. So you do find in that area of agriculture, and not just directly in the application of the agricultural science, but the labs that go along with it, they would be utilizing our standards, these national standards.
And I could well imagine in the case of exports in Lucia as well, in terms of export facilitation and guidance
of course,
individuals who are looking to export into new markets, the issue of how do you meet the compliance standards,
market
for
access
the market access requirements is a really important aspect there. I guess there's that synergy between the two of you.
And again, standards, the harmonization of standards from country to country, that will allow easier market access requirements. And all those persons who are trying to export their products, we're also the what they call a TBT, basically a checkpoint, an e-ping where any alerts of what any possible technical barriers to trade would come in through us, and it will be directed to them, so they're aware.
And of course, the matter of you being a repository for these standards. I mean, a lot of these standards, international standards, are pretty pricey.
Right.
If I have to go online and say I want to get the NFPA code, it's going to cost a tremendous amount of money as an individual. Is there any sort of facility within the Bureau of Standards to facilitate individuals who want to find out about those standards? Or
so definitely, it's a good point you raised there. Why? Because as a national standardizing body and being also a member of ISO and any of these other regional or international organizations, we do have that opportunity to locally adopt these international or regional standards. When we do that, the standards fall dramatically in price. So a standard that might have been 500 Swiss francs from the ISO would possibly be 50 EC dollars, 100 EC dollars. So when you look at that comparative pricing, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And again, within our procedure, our process of developing standards, that's where you'll find persons coming in and writing up a proposal. So you might want a particular international standard that you see, possibly a whistleblowing or compliance-based standard or something management services related, and you realize that this is 700 Swiss francs, and you just can't afford, as your small company, 700 Swiss francs to pay for one standard. You say, okay, you write your proposal to adopt this standard, and we go through the national process and adopt that standard. And you see that standard is much cheaper, possibly $100, or depending on the document size, the work that's put in, etc.
So certainly the Bureau can be this gateway, a repository for standards information at a national level.
At a national, regional, and international level.
Well, and in terms of getting international standards, especially when there aren't really any regional or local standards to be applied, which is more than likely is usually going to be the case. And in any cases, especially for market access, you would want to be getting those external standards.
There's a whole new area of voluntary sustainable standards, VSS as they call that. Europe, the European market, they really buy based on voluntary sustainable standards. So again, a company is always looking to differentiate, to make themselves more competitive, have that comparative advantage. And when they've almost eked out everything they could see in terms of the visual and in terms of the taste quality aspects, what is the next thing they go to? And then again, I'm using Europe because we do have the EPA, the EU CARIFORUM EPA, which is an area of market access. You're looking at these organizations, these companies that are buying over there. They're looking at what are your labor practices? What are your is there child labor? Do you have any socially sustainability? Is there any environmental sustainability? So a lot of those standards, voluntary sustainable standards, are becoming more and more and more important in terms of their buying preferences up there. So when you're looking at export, these are areas of standards implementation also to achieve greater market access to these companies.
So standards effectively, you can think of it as maybe a passport or
definitely
a really major way of opening opportunities for trade and for development, and of course really important in the case of business and industry. We don't have very much time left, unfortunately, here on the program. And I do know that you mentioned the entire matter of artificial intelligence, and the impacts there. Your takes, though, in terms of where are you seeing this going? What sectors in particular?
Every sector.
I mean, I know we know every sector,
every sector.
But in terms of where would the focus be really in the case of St. Lucia and small islands for the need for standards in that regard?
Okay. So I joked about every sector, but when we think about it, to a certain extent, AI has been around us, and we've been dealing with it for a long period of time. Where, for example, in accounting, you have these software programs that are getting more and more sophisticated. I was just told recently you could literally take a picture of an invoice and it uploads directly into the accounting software. So people are doing accounting on the fly, or bookkeeping, I should say. Let me not disregard the accountants out there.
Well, we can talk about the lawyers too. There are lots of very interesting legal AI platforms there, which may not be to the liking of many.
The AI, but even on the standards development, that drafting side, there are AI programs that could draft, and even within that, ISO and CrossQ are looking at they basically wanting to keep some degree of control of it, because it can get pretty crazy. And how do you maintain some of that human aspect? So within the AI area, within the AI field, where is it going? It's going into all of these places. Anywhere that needs automation, anywhere that needs that degree of digitization, you're finding AI being very, very relevant. Drafting processes, as I just said, AI is of great relevance. In fact, when we have Zoom meetings now, these regional international meetings, nobody's sitting there taking notes again with a pen.
So recorded.
It's recorded. There's the AI that's here that's taking the minutes of the meeting. So you're looking at that's how pervasive it is. It's really going to impact us in our everyday lives. And again, in terms of technology, the digital technology, we're normally again takers of that. So we really have to be looking at what's outside coming in. Where are we going with our transport, just in about everything, and even food. We spoke about food and food, education, all these different areas. Where are we going with that? How is AI really going to impact us? There is a great impact, very, very great impact. Education is such a strong one also.
Yeah. Well, we tend to be really behind the curve in so many of these things, and I'm pretty certain by the time you see autonomous vehicles on the road,
I didn't want to raise that one,
you're gonna find that somebody's gonna say, "Hey, why I'm gonna bring this down the same ocean." You will definitely be seeing that, although they will have the legislation available.
So that is an important point. That where we see some of these things occurring, that's where the standardization process could be very powerful. So how do we quickly get these players together? I mean, it's a longer process, but again, how do we start that process going through to get the best results on the other side? So you gave an example of autonomous vehicles. Develop a standard that will allow electric cars and autonomous vehicles, possibly even in our public transport. I mean, hot area to touch again. But where do we see ourselves? And let the experts guide it. Again, these experts, various stakeholders, private sector, public sector, academia, you name it, consumer persons or consumer protection persons, all involved again to give these best outcomes. Yeah.
Well, it's an iterative process that's never going to end, clearly, as man continues along his march forward for betterment. Thank you so very much for sharing with us today, Andre Charles, Head of Department at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, as well as Mr. Don Pierre, Compliance Officer. Gentlemen, for sharing with us, of course, for a really insightful look into the whole matter of standards just after International Standards Day. Any parting thoughts from you, gentlemen?
You want to go first? I will.
Great.
All right. So just again, thank you very much to Calix George for having us today. Thank you very much to RCI for giving us the time to share what we do at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. Again, I would just like to raise this book. This book is going to be, it's available on our website. It will be distributed to teachers in schools where you can get some insight into the quality infrastructure of St. Lucia. And again, having students utilize that information inside of it, because again, it's almost an area, every area academically involves quality and the quality infrastructure and standards and what we do in standards development.
And I know you pitch it for students in schools, but I think
everybody,
look at it, and it's certainly something that a lot of adults
because
find quite
it actually breaks down the
Right.
technicality of the actual standards and what we do, because the standards jargon could be very, very difficult to understand. So it breaks it down as far as a primary school person would be able to understand, and even the general public, because it's a lot of knowledge in there. So I would employ everyone on island to at least get a look at this.
Wonderful.
Well said. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and you can check it out on your website, as you mentioned.
Yes.
For download. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us.
Alex, thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure.
It's been a great pleasure indeed. And of course, all our listeners, hope you have a very good lunch. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.
Alex, thanks, man.